Hey, welcome back. It is day 4 of our camp. I'm here with my campers again. Let them introduce themselves as always.
I'm Neela.
Neela?
Hi, I'm Bowen.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Keegan. Hi, I'm McKinley.
Great. So we've got a new game for you today, but before we get into it, let's just kind of quickly review just a couple of the skills we learned last time. Yesterday's was our hardest game of the camp. It was this like fish game going around. You probably had a different plan. And we learned all kinds of good skills. Let's just kind of glance at some of the skills that we learned. We learned how to do race car movements, like changing our angle, but continuing to go forwards. We learned that we could draw sprites. We learned that we could use random numbers, so like our objects started off at random numbers. We learned how to broadcast events last time, so like when somebody hit him, they just said, "Hey, I hit him." We learned how to record custom sounds, like game over. And we learned how to import images. A whole like smorgasbord of skills last time. We're going to use a couple of those skills in today's game. Let's take a look at today's game. So it's called Catching Dinner. The theme of my game is that I have Avery again. So I kind of like the Avery sprite. And my Avery is holding a basket. And I'm using the left arrow key to move her in one direction and the right arrow key to move her in another direction. And the goal is that she's trying to catch things that would be good for her to eat for dinner. So a taco, a watermelon, some bread, those are good things for dinner. But she tries to avoid things that would be bad for dinner. In this case, the things that would be bad for dinner is the donuts, right? So I'm waiting for a donut to come. If I catch a donut, that's what finishes my game, right? So that's the idea of this game. You can see that there's a score involved. And you try to catch as many like good and healthy things as you can. But if you catch the bad thing, then it's game over. Before we dive in, I just want to point out that the interesting thing about this game is that there's one Avery, which is probably what you would expect. But then there's only one sprite for the good food and only one sprite for the bad food. So how do we do that, right? Because, of course, there's like all kinds of sprites falling, but there's only one of them down here. And the nice thing about that is that they all share the same code, which is cool, but you're making clones of them. So like if I was to make a clone of myself, I'd be like 1 of me, and then 2 of me, and then 4 of me, and then 8 of me. There would be a lot of clones. So we're going to learn about cloning. So let's go ahead and go to Scratch. So go ahead and go to scratch.mit.edu, click on Create, and we'll start a new game for today. So before we get started today, first I want to get rid of the cat. I want you to kind of do some of the things to establish your theme in your game right up front. So you can see that mine is Avery. Avery is catching good foods and avoiding bad foods. Decide what you think your theme should be, and we're going to start off by adding those sprites. So for me, I want just Avery, so I'm going to click on Choose a Sprite, and I'm going to go with Avery right here. If you want to, you could choose to look for something on the internet, right? So if you wanted to get an image from the internet, remember last time how we chose to like do Google searches and search for images, and then we went into tools and pick ones with color transparency. You could do that if you wanted. I'm not going to do it here. I'm just going to pick Avery, which is a sprite that I want. I'm going to resize Avery a little bit. And then what I choose to do is, if you look at my game, I chose to give Avery a bowl that she's holding. How did I give her a bowl? That's kind of a sneaky thing to do. I'm going to show you how I did that. If you would like to give a bowl to your person, you can, but it is optional, right? So here's what I'm going to do to give her a bowl. I'm going to go into Costumes, and I could try to draw a bowl, but I'm not a very good artist, so that would probably be a bad plan. What I'm going to do is over here, I'm going to choose to add a costume. So over here, you can add sprites. And over here, you can add more costumes to the existing sprite. And that's a trick we're going to use a lot today. So I'm going to say choose a costume. And I'm going to search for a bowl. So there's this bowl A that I found. Now when I add the bowl, it adds it as like a separate sprite. But to fix that, what you can do is you can highlight the whole area and copy the bowl. So I use Control-C to copy. Come back into this one and Control-V to paste it in here. And so you can see that I can give her a bowl if I wanted. That's just a type of drawing trick that you can use where you add some other sprite and then you kind of drag over the whole thing to highlight it, and then you just use Control C to copy, go to where you want, and Control V to paste. Now at the end of the day, I just want this one costume of Avery. I don't need this one where she's standing with her hands behind her back, and I don't need this one. I can actually delete those costumes and nothing bad will happen. So just kind of a little trick there. The next thing I do is I want to pick my good items and my bad items. Again, your theme can be different than mine, but I'm going to choose to add foods as my good items. So I'm going to click on Choose a Sprite, and I'm going to add one food. Maybe I'll add the apple first. Now, if you look at my game over here, here's what I did that was sneaky over here, is I added one food. You can see I added a taco first, and then I added a bunch of different costumes to that one sprite. We're going to do the same thing. So I've got an apple. An apple currently has one costume in him, and I'm going to choose to add more costumes. So I'm going to add other costumes in my sprites. So maybe I'll go into food, and I'll just add a few foods, right? So bananas is a good food. What's another good food that I've got here? Oh, I had tacos in my other one. Maybe I should add a taco to this one as well. Tacos are delicious. And then I'll add one more just for fun. So I'll go to food, and I'll have, I want it to be a good, like, healthy thing, watermelon. Looks like a good thing to eat. So we're using costumes in a different way this time. You can see that I've got one sprite and 4 different costumes. So costumes this time, sometimes we use costumes to make like animations, but this time we're like making it look totally different. One trick you do have to be careful of is they do need to be roughly the same size. So you can see my apple and my banana and my watermelon, they're all about the same size. But look at my taco, it's kind of huge, right? So if sometimes I show an apple or sometimes I show a banana or sometimes I show a watermelon, that's fine. But then when I put the taco on, it's gigantic. You could make it smaller. So I could like make it smaller over here. But the problem is then it makes my apples and my bananas smaller. So with this trick, you will occasionally have to grab one of them, highlight the whole thing, and make them be roughly the same size, such that if you go between the apple, the banana, the taco, or the watermelon, they're all roughly the same size. And that I'm actually really happy with. So that's my good food. My good food right now is called apple. I'm going to change it to be a good item. If you don't want to change yours, you don't have to. I just wanted to point out that you can change the names of your sprites. So like Avery here, in my mind, she's my hero. So whatever my hero is, I just name it hero. And then this is my good item. Next, I want to add a bad item. So I'm going to click on Choose a Sprite. And I'm going to pick a bad item. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pick something that you would have for dessert, not for dinner. So I'm going to add donuts as my bad item. And then I'm going to choose to rename mine as bad item. And I'm going to make it roughly the same size as my good item. Now this style of coding is a little different than what I've done before. I'm just kind of like getting my game set up to start with, and then I'm going to start writing the code, and I'll just be able to knock things out. The other thing I want to do is I want a backdrop. So I'm going to choose a backdrop. I think in mine I actually picked like a jungle theme. So I'll stick with the jungle for this as well. Great. So I'm going to pause it, and I'm going to let my campers get all their objects figured out, and then we'll start in on the code. So you can pause it, and you can get all your things figured out. So one hero, the good item has a variety of costumes, and then my bad item has only one costume. All right, see if you can make yours look like mine. All right, so all my campers got their heroes figured out. They got their various good items figured out. They got their bad item figured out. Took us a little bit, but we got there. Let's dive into the code. And I'm going to start off with Avery, which is our hero. So go ahead and find your hero, whoever your hero is. Mine's Avery. And let's go into the code. This sprite's going to be kind of the most similar to things we've done in the past. It's going to start with an event of when green flag clicked. So go ahead and take a when green flag clicked and bring it over. You could set her starting position if you wanted to be the middle. That's optional. I think I will go ahead and do it. So I'm going to go ahead and find this go to XY. That way I'm guaranteed that she always starts the game in the very middle. That's optional. It doesn't really matter, but there's no harm in doing it. And then I'm going to do what I've done so many times. I'm going to make a forever loop. So I'm going to drag out a forever loop and snap it onto here. You'll notice that this pattern happens in a lot of our games. When the green flag is clicked, do some initialization things, and then do some things forever. The thing we're going to do forever is we're going to listen for the left arrow and the right arrow. And so if the left arrow is pressed, we'll move to the left. If the right arrow is pressed, we'll move to the right. So we're going to add 2 if statements. So drag 2 if statements, number 1 and number 2. And then inside the if statements, I want to put a condition. So the condition that I care about is the key press. So I'm going to go into sensing. I'm going to find key space pressed. And then, of course, it's got a little white down arrow next to it. And so I'm going to click on this little white down arrow, and I'm going to change it to left arrow for the top one. And then I'm going to change it to right arrow for the bottom one. And again, if you ever need to pause it, definitely just pause the video, and then you can get right caught up to where I'm doing. Now, inside left arrow and right arrow, in the past, I've always done like point in direction and then move some amount. We could do that again, but I'm just going to show you an alternative. I'm going to just change the X value. So the X value is like the horizontal value. So I'm going to go into motion. And for both of these, I'm going to have a change X by. So go ahead and grab a change X by and drop it into both places. Now, right now, if you were to run the game, positive X would move to the right. So the right arrow would work. It would be good. But the left arrow is not going to work. So campers, what do I need to type in here instead of 10? Yeah, so I need to put in a negative 10. That's right. Now, the fun thing about this game is that Avery's essentially done. So I could run it, and I could see if I'm happy with that speed. So I hit on the go button. And then if I hit the right arrow, she'll move to the right. If I hit the left arrow, she'll move to the left. And so I think that Avery is actually in pretty good shape. We're going to have to check to see if certain things are hitting her. But actually other sprites are going to have that responsibility. Her whole goal is just to move left and right. So she's kind of just like a paddle in a game. Another thing that we could do, if you wanted to do, is we could make a variable out of her speed. And so we could make her variable, make her speed be a variable. And then we could set it once and use it both places. But honestly, if it's just these two right here, it's extra work to make a variable. So the next thing I want to do with Avery done is I want to save my game. So I'm going to call my game Catching Dinner. If you want a different name for your game, that's just fine. But I'm going to go and type that in as my name. It does automatically save, so you don't have to do anything else. Or you could hit File, Save Now. And I'm going to help my campers type some for the names of their game. All right, so with Avery doing well, the next thing I want to do is I want to be able to make food. So I want to be able to make good items and then eventually bad items. Now, interestingly, who should make the foods? We could put that code on the hero sprite. That would be fine. But I'm going to show you that you can also put it on the stage. So click over here where it says stage. And you'll notice that the stage has backdrops, which we've already set a backdrop on it. But a stage also has code. So you could totally put code in the backdrop. And that's what we're going to do this time. And so we want to go to events. We want to find when green flag is clicked. And the code that the stage is going to run is it's going to be responsible for creating the good items and the bad items. So he's going to also have a forever loop. So let's go to control, forever. And what the stage is going to do is he's going to make a new good item every second. So every second he's going to stick another one on the screen. The way that he does that is first he has a wait for 1 second. So he waits for a second and then he does something. And the thing that he does, it's actually in control here. Scroll down in control and find where it says create clone of. Now we want to create a clone of not the hero, but of the good item. Eventually we'll do good and bad items, but for now we're just going to do good items. And so the neat thing about this is that if you run it, it will actually create a clone of whatever your good item is. Mine is currently set to a watermelon. Now the question is where will it put it, right? We can run it and we can see what it does by default. So it's creating a clone of my watermelon. It's not very exciting because it appears as though it's making it right on top of the old watermelon, right? So that's not much fun. So let's make it more interesting. So let's make the watermelon like go to some position when it starts. So the stage is done. Now go into the watermelon. Now we're going to do something very different here. Normally we start with this event for when green flag is clicked. That's not what we're going to do this time. We're going to start with a different event. It's down here in control, and it's when I start as a clone. So whenever I start as a clone, I'm going to do some stuff. So this is different than what we've done before. The things that I want to do, I want to go to some X position at the top of the screen. So I want to go somewhere up here. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take my good item and I'm going to move it to roughly the top, just like somewhere near the top. And then I'm going to go to motion, and I'm going to find this go to XY. Now, if you think about what this game does as it's playing, is all things start at the top, but they kind of start randomly along the top, somewhere along the top. So how do we do that? So this would make it always go to that spot, which is no good. We want to go to a random X at this Y, which is nearly at 180, right? So to get a random value, we click on operators. Inside operators, find pick a random number. And the random values for X, if we remember from previous days, this screen goes from negative 240, which I guess I could just move this over here and I can kind of see that. So it goes from like negative 240 all the way over to positive 240. So I want to pick a random number from negative 240 to positive 240. So now, whenever we run this game, a new watermelon should show up somewhere along the top. So I took my original and I kind of moved it back to here. So now when you run your game, every second, a new watermelon should show up at some random position. And so they're just kind of collecting up there. They're not moving. They're just collecting. By the way, mine's a watermelon, just because that's the costume that I've currently clicked on. If I click on an apple and I run it again, then all my apples are going to show up at the top. So it's kind of neat how it's the same sprite. It's just going to have a different costume. All right, let's do some more things with our good item. So we don't want it to always be an apple or always be a watermelon. We want to switch what it is. So let's go into looks. Let's go into switch costume to. And this is kind of tricky about Scratch. It looks like there's a drop down arrow here and you can actually pick like, apples if you want it to be apples, but then they'd all be apples, or bananas and it'd all be animals. We want to pick a random costume. So go into operators, find this pick random. And the fun thing about switch costume 2 is it can also receive a number. So you can see that I have 4 costumes and there's a little number up here, 1, 2, 3, or 4. So I can refer to them by their name or their number, which is really handy. So I want to pick a random number. Since I have 4 costumes, 1, 2, 3, 4, I'm going to pick a random number from 1 to 4. And so this is going to pick a random position and then a random costume. Now if I hit the play button, what happens is it's not always an apple. Sometimes it's an apple, sometimes it's a banana, sometimes it's a taco, sometimes it's a watermelon. And your game should be able to do the same thing. And eventually the top will get really crowded with different food that you might want to eat. Great. So we're doing really good. More initialization code. I want them to fall at a certain speed. And I want that speed, if we go look at this one, to not always be the same, right? So you can see how some fall, that watermelon just flew through super fast, right? So they fall at different speeds is our goal. So that's what we're going to do next. We're going to make it different speeds. So I want to make a variable. So we've done variables many times. You click on variables, click on make a variable. This variable is going to be just for this sprite. And this is important because they can all be different speeds, right? So I'm going to call it just speed. If you wanted to, you could call it fall speed or good item speed, but I'm just going to call it speed. I'm going to say OK. And then what I'm going to do, I want to get rid of my variable. I don't want my variable in here. I'm just going to right click on it and say delete my variable. I like to delete it because then whenever I drag something over, like if I drag over the set speed to, it's going to default to saying speed instead of my variable. And the speed we want is a random variable, which is kind of fun. So there's lots of random in this game. This is the fall speed. This is how fast does it fall. Fall speed should be negative. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a range of -6 to -2. If you want your stuff to potentially fall really fast, you could do -10, but that's going to be really fast. And if you want it to fall really slow, you can do -1. But -6 is pretty darn fast, and -2 is slow enough for me. So that's the fall speed. Now we want to actually start falling. So to actually start falling, we need to do something forever. So I'm going to put in a forever in here. And then I'm going to go into motion. And I'm going to find change y by. So again, today we're using this change xy and change y by, which is just a little bit different than move by. But change y by speed. So I'm going to go into variables and put in speed. And I'm going to try to run it again. And so now they should all start falling. So now everybody shows up at the top and then they start falling, which is cool. All right, so things are going good. By the way, what one of my campers had as a problem is he accidentally put in a switch backdrop to instead of switch costume. Don't do that. Make sure it says switch costume to. So things are going good, but there's a few things that we need to fix. One thing that's confusing is that my original is sitting right here, right? And my original actually doesn't get used in the game. So here's what I want to do. I want to hide a couple things. So I want to click on my original, which is the apple. And see how there's this show button here, so where it's got like an eyeball or then like an eyeball crossed out. I want to hide my original. Now hiding your original is good, but the problem is that all the clones of it are also hidden, right? So that's easy to fix. So we hide the original, and then in code, so in code we go into looks, we find where it says show, and we just stick a show on here just before the forever loop. So I let it go ahead and pick its position while it's still hidden, switch its costume while it's still hidden, set the speed while it's still hidden, and then I show it, and then it starts to fall. The other thing I'm going to do really quick is I'm going to go into variables, and I'm going to check this box next to speed, because I don't need that showing up there, right? It doesn't really add anything to the game. So now if I run it again, you can see that it has different clones that fall. So I've got different clones that are falling. And my original is hidden, right? So that's an important thing to do in these games. Now the next thing we want to do is that if you catch one of these food, you'll see that nothing happens. And also you can see that when they get to the bottom, nothing happens at the bottom either. And so we want to, if you catch one, score a point. And if it gets to the bottom, we just want it to disappear and just not score any points for you. So let's go ahead and add those. In code, if we're trying to check for different conditions, those are if statements. So in addition to falling, we want to add a couple of if statements. So I'm going to go into control, and I'm going to drag over an if statement. This top one's going to be for like if I'm touching the hero. And then I'm going to drag over another if statement. And this bottom one is going to be for like if I'm touching the bottom of the screen, which we're just going to check the X value getting so low. Great, so let's go ahead and put in those two conditions. The condition for the first one is in sensing, touching mouse pointer. Obviously, touching mouse pointer is not what we want, but that's why there's this little white drop down. And we're going to switch it to if I'm touching the hero. So I renamed Avery earlier to be hero. I just typed her name in right there. So if we're touching the hero, what should happen? So let's go ahead and look at the solution over here and see what happens. Well, what happens is it scores a point, makes a pop sound, and makes it go invisible. There I touched the bad item. We'll get to the bad item. So there were like three things that all happened fast. We wanted to make a pop sound, so make some sound effect. Let's go into sounds and see what sound this one has. Right now mine has chomp. I guess I could play chomp. Chomp is fine. My original code played pop. So I'm going to go into sound. I'm going to say play chomp until done. So that's one thing we wanted to do. The next thing we wanted to do is we wanted to score a point. So we're going to have a variable for score. So I'm going to go into variables, make a variable, and this one's going to be called score. Now score is very different than speed. Score is shared by everybody. So anybody can increment score. There's only one score in the whole game. It's not like everybody has their own individual score. There's one score. So score is for all sprites, and I'm going to say OK. Now whenever you make a variable, there's a couple things you have to do. You have to create the variable, which is one. You have to initialize its value because you don't want your score to like start like where you left off the previous game. So we've got to initialize the value somewhere. You can initialize its value in a lot of places. The best place, in my opinion, is actually back over in the stage. So I know we're working on the good food, but just for a minute, click over here on the stage. So we're going to go over to his code really quick. And I'm going to set score to 0 right after the green flag is clicked. And so this makes sense. Whenever the game starts, my stage's code, it's kind of like the main code. It's going to reset the score to be 0, and then the game is going to begin with all these clones. All right. So making the variable, good first step. Initializing it to 0, great next step. Now let's go into your good item. And inside the good item, we want to change the score. So after we play our sound, or before, it doesn't really matter on the order here. I'm going to put it before, just because I feel like it. So I'm going to change the score by 1. I'm going to play a chomp sound, and I'm going to play it until it's done, just so you hear the whole sound. And then I'm going to disappear. And the way we're going to disappear is we're not going to hide. We're going to go into control and see where it says delete this clone, drag over a delete this clone. So easy come, easy go. So this clone was made, it fell a little bit, and then this one hit the hero. It made a sound, it incremented the score, and then it got deleted. So let's try to play the game again. Try to catch your first one that comes. And it should make a bite sound. And that's good. Now, if you don't catch them, something else happens. They just end up down here on the bottom, right? If they end up down here on the bottom, you can actually just walk over and I think you can still collect them from the bottom, right? That'd make the game kind of easy. So let's fix that. So whenever they get to the bottom or whenever they get to a certain height, we're going to say, hey, you can no longer just walk over and collect them, right? So whenever they get to a certain height, that's going to be this next if statement, we're going to just delete them and you can't possibly score a point. So what we want to check for is we want to check if their Y position is less than some negative value. So the first thing I need here to go in this diamond is an operator for less than. So if the Y position is something we can get from motion. So if the Y position is less than some number, the question is, what's that number, right? If you were to type in -180, that would actually be bad because that would be like the very bottom of the screen. So you could probably do like -170. That's just like a little bit up from the screen. Or you could be like really conservative and do like -160, which is what I think I'm going to do. So I'm going to say if my Y position is less than -160, so I'm going to grab my donut and just kind of show you where 160 is. It's like 160 is pretty low, right? So I guess my donut can get there. There it's -160, so really low. Actually, 160 may not be conservative enough. I'm going to do 150. So if you get below 150, which is about this height, then I'm going to delete the clone. So I'm going to go into control, and I'm going to say delete this clone. Try your game again. So if you catch them in the air, you get points. But if they get to the bottom, they just kind of disappear, right? So you can see that they just disappear, which is good. Great. I'm actually really happy with the good item, and things are going great. I'm gonna help my campers out. All right, so the good item I think is in pretty good shape. Now we're gonna go through and do the bad item. So the bad item just like we did before, it's going to get created by the backdrop. So go ahead and click over here where it says stage. And you can see that we've got code over here. So obviously we create a good item. Now here's what I want to do. Take this create good item and just set it over here to the side just for a minute. And what we're going to do is sometimes we're going to create good items, and then other times we're going to create bad items, right? Now what our game is going to do is it's going to randomly pick a good item or a bad item to drop. So it's just going to randomly just like drop one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add an if-else statement in here. And this condition, we're going to come back to it, but sometimes we're going to drop a good item. And then in the other situation, we're going to drop a bad item. So this condition is going to decide which one it's going to be this time. And that's where if, then, and then else statements can be good. So how do we make it drop good items, sometimes bad items, other times? Well, we're going to use a combination of operators. So we're going to use a less than symbol again, and a random number. So into the left-hand side, we're going to put a random number. So we're going to pick a random number from 1 to 10. And if that number is less than maybe 8, so if it picks 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7, so it drops a good item. But if it picks 8, 9, or 10, then drop a bad item, right? So if you run it now, what should happen is it should drop your good items. And it's making the bad items. It is working. The code is working. But they don't have any code yet, right? So let's do this. Let's stop it. And let's see the bad items work. Now we could write the code from scratch on the bad item, but the code from the good item is so similar that we should definitely just use it to start with. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take my good item code, and I'm just going to drag it over, and I'm going to drop it right on the bad item. You can see how it kind of wiggles when you get it on there. What that does is that just makes a copy of it. So now I've got my good item code, and then I come over here to my bad item code, and my bad item code looks just the same. It's kind of funny how how similar the two are. Really, the only thing that changes is if you're touching the hero, instead of scoring a point, you want something bad to happen. So I'm just going to temporarily take this code out of there. In fact, I can probably just drop it in the trash can, right? And I'm going to run it and see what happens. So now the bad item should fall, just like good items. The only difference is it won't score a point, right? So like there, I got the bad item, but nothing really happened when I hit the bad item. It just kind of kept falling through me. Now we've also got this problem of the original bad item is still just sitting on the screen. See if you can fix that problem all by yourself. All right, so I'm going to do what I had you do. Really, it was just select the donut and just hide the original. And so now there is no original. So the donut doesn't do anything bad when I hit it. So what I want to do is when I hit the donut, I want stuff to happen. Since I want the whole game to stop, that's an excellent opportunity for us to broadcast an event. We've actually learned about that before. It's over in events. And where it says broadcast message 1, I want to drag this into my if statement. And instead of calling it message 1, I'm going to give it a new name. So I'm going to say new message. And I'm going to type in game over. So a broadcast message is really just like somebody screams game over, right? So whenever the bad item touches the hero, he screams game over. And everybody listens, right? Everybody listens everywhere. This sprite is going to listen for it. So he's going to have a when I receive game over. And everybody is going to have a when I receive game over. So they all do something, including the stage. The first thing that they're going to do when they receive game over is they're going to stop their normal script. That's a pretty common thing. So that's in control near the bottom. And I find this a little confusing about Scratch. It's the one that says stop all, and then you switch it to stop other scripts in the sprite. So basically it means once I receive game over, stop doing whatever there was over here. And I could add that code to everybody. I'm going to add it to the good item. I'm going to add it to the hero. I'm going to add it to the stage. Everybody kind of needs to do that much. What the heck? I'll go ahead and do it now. So I'm going to drag it from here, drop it on the hero. drop it on the good item, and drop it on the stage. I think it's kind of cool how many people there are with code in this. I'm going to make sure that everybody's got that much code. So my hero, Avery, she's got it. So whenever she hears game over, she stops what she was doing. That does that. The good item stops what they were doing. The stage, even the stage has to stop what the stage was doing. So every single sprite stops what they were doing, and then they might do some other things. All right, so let's try our code right now and just kind of see what happens. So if I collect good items, so like tacos are good, I get points. But if I hit a donut, so I'm gonna hit a donut right here, it just kind of freezes everything. Now, interestingly, everything freezes, but like it doesn't feel like the game was over. So let's add like a sound effect or something like that, just to kind of let people know it's game over. And we have to decide who's gonna do that. We could have the hero do it. We could have the good item or bad item do it. I think I'm gonna go to the stage. So I'm gonna go over to the stage, and I have the stage kind of play the game over sound effect. So I'm gonna go into his sound, and I'm gonna look for a sound. So I'm gonna click on choose a sound. I'm going to use the sound drum boing. Obviously, you could pick a different sound, but I think drum boing, I think that conveys the message that you just hit something you shouldn't have. So I added that to my sound, so now I've got drum boing over there. Then I'm going to go into code. Keep in mind I'm still in the stage. And I'm going to go into sound. I'm going to say play drum boing. What I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to start it, and then I'm going to put on a time delay for how long I want to wait. Maybe I'll wait, 4 seconds. So I'm going to play that boing, and then I'm going to freeze for like 4 seconds, and then after that 4 seconds, I'm going to do a stop all. Stop all is good because it'll actually clear all the sprites off. So you'll hear this boing. You're going to wait for about 4 seconds, and then you'll clear off everything. So I'm going to go ahead and try it and see if it's working. So I run it. I collect food, and it. Now you can see that there's a little bug of my food stayed on me for a little bit, boing, and then my game should end after 4 seconds. 4 seconds felt a little long for me. Maybe I'll do like 2 seconds or 3 seconds or something like that. Great, so I think that mine might be done. So I'm gonna run it again here. Collecting food, so things that I should eat for dinner. Trying to catch my dinner. And then if I hit a donut, I get a boing, and then I get a game over. Cool. My game is done. I'm gonna choose to click on See Project Page, and I'm gonna share it with other people. Now I've got this URL that I could give to like grandparents or things like that. By the way, you can also put instructions in here if you'd like to try to make people know how to play your game. But I think mine is a done game. So I'm going to see how my campers did. All right, Neela, you're up first. So what theme do you have on your game today? Oh, you've got a dog. That looks like our dog, Neela. And then the dog, you can play it again. Hit the green flag again. What's the dog catching, Neela?
The food.
Catching the food. And then who's the dog trying to avoid? Those bats or whatever they are?
Dinosaurs. Pterodactyls.
Oh, they're pterodactyls.
Pterodactyls are actually my favorite type of dinosaur.
Oh, that's good to know. Very nice. Bowen, what have you got?
I've got a shark.
A shark?
And
Cool.
you can see the others.
All right, run it.
Oh,
A shark?
a can.
Oh, yeah, he's trying to avoid
A
shark.
bottle.
Bowen, he's like, oh,
That was gonna be a glass.
no! All right, do it again. Green flag. Let's see you get a point. All right, green flag, Bo. All right, let's see you get a point. Cool, there you're catching lots of fish, which is great. And then you've just got to avoid the shark, or the trash. Nice work, Bowen. Did you have fun making the game today, Bo?
Mm-hmm.
Pretty awesome.
Now I'm just gonna stop it.
You're good. All right, McKinley, what have you got today?
I made mine about unicorns and fruits. And then I made it so I can change the speed so I can make my unicorn go faster or slower.
Cool. And then what's the unicorn trying to dodge? Oh, yeah, the parrots. Nice. So you have an evil parrot and a unicorn. It looks wonderful. Very nicely done. All right, Keegan, what have you got today? So we've got a dog, and a dog's trying to catch bones. Oh, or fortune cookies. You've got a lot of things coming down. Did you change how fast they came out?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, I think you did.
Yeah, you did.
Because there's a flood of them. Cool. So the dog is trying to avoid the evil squirrel, and then he's trying to catch bones and things. Did you guys have fun today?
Yes. I'm a pterodactyl.
You're a pterodactyl? All right, well, we hope you enjoyed making a game today. We learned a lot of things like changing X and Ys. Creating clones was our big thing. And so that's it. Hopefully you kind of learned the main message that coding's fun. You can do this. And it really makes a lot of sense to use like this one sprite with lots of clones of it. Then that way you can reuse the same code instead of having to make lots of copies of code. All right, we'll see you next time. Friday, I promise, is a little shorter. Hopefully you enjoy it. We're going to see if we can convince McKinley to lead the show tomorrow, so it should be fun. All right, see you then. Bye.